Need free advice for medical needs, vitamin D service, COVID test for travellers, Urdu and Punjabi staff available. Visit Shawland Pharmacy, 7 Kilmarnock Road, Shawlands. Telephone 632-0293.
लाखों सलाम लाखों सलाम लाखों सलाम लाखों सलाम मुस्तफा जाने रहमत पे लाखों सलाम शम्माए बज़ में हिदायत पे लाखों सलाम हम गरीबों के आका पे बेहद दरूद हम गरीबों के आका पे बेहद दरूद हम फकीरों की सरबत पे लाखों सलाम शम्माए बज़ में हिदायत पे लाखों सलाम लाखों सलाम लाखों सलाम शहरे यारे इरम ताजदारे हरम शहरे यारे इरम ताजदारे हरम नौबहारे शिफात पे लाखों सलाम मुस्तफा जाने रहमत पे लाखों सलाम शम्माए बज़ में हिदायत पे लाखों सलाम उसकी बातों की लज़्ज़त पे लाखों दुरूद उसकी बातों की लज़्ज़त पे लाखों दुरूद उसके खुतबे की हैबत पे लाखों सलाम मुस्तफा जाने रहमत पे लाखों सलाम लाखों सलाम लाखों सलाम अर्श ता फर्श है जिसके ज़ेरे नगी अर्श ता फर्श है जिसके ज़ेरे नगी अर्श
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। शुरू अल्लाह के नाम से जो बड़ा मेहरबान निहायत रहम करने वाला है। सामीन, रेडियो रमज़ान 87.7 FM से आज 17 रमज़ानुल मुबारक यौम बदर और हम आपकी खिदमत में एक दफ़ा फिर प्रोग्राम रिफ्लेक्शंस लिए हुए हाजिर हैं। अल्लाह ताला के हुजूर हम शुक्रगुजार हैं कि उसने एक दफ़ा फिर ज़िंदगी में ये मौका अता किया कि उसके कलाम की बरकत को समेटते हुए हम उसके कलाम को सुने, समझें और आपके साथ शेयर करें। ये सरासर उसकी रहमत है कि ये मौके वो हमें बार बार देता है कि हम उसकी किताब को खोलें, उसकी आयात का मुताला करें और उससे बरक़ात और फ़यूज़ हासिल करें। This is Radio Ramadan 87.7 FM program Reflections, 10 past 8 in Glasgow. Today iftar is at 9 o'clock. I am your host Zubair with my guest Sheikh Ridwan Muhammad with program Reflections. Surah Anbiya, 21st Surah, is what's under discussion. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. फैसल शेख की आवाज नहीं आ रही. अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar. So I think it's a signs, one of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you're never the same. Sometimes there is qabz and sometimes there is bast. Ya qabid, ya basit. Oh, subhanallah. Time flies. I think it's been good 6-7 years when we did those names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these were the two names that stuck with me. Every time there is a high mood, I say Ya Basit. And whenever there is, depleted energy, you remember that Allah is also Qabiz. Not saying that I am in low energy today, but maybe I am. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Sheikh, how are you today?
Alhamdulillah.
Yes, Alhamdulillah is what I should say. But no energy today. Somehow, somewhere. I think Lahore was really hot, 42 degrees today. 42 degrees. So it was really hot. First hot day. And I was in an iftar in a factory floor. There were like maybe over 100 people. This guy had invited all the laborers, all the factory workers for an iftar. And, we were sitting in 2 rows with kujur in between, like facing each other on the floor. And just before iftar, this slightly kind of moderately religious looking person with slightly longish beard. So everyone else was talking and he was kind of like murmuring, probably reading some dua. So someone said, Haji Sahab, dua karaye. So the Haji Sahab started making dua. So everyone just kept kind of like went into a quiet mood. And the dua he made, I think the first time I heard it was quite poetic. And the dua was, munajat was in a poem he had learned. And no one knew that he knew that. Because he had closed eyes and he was just kind of more तरन्नुम के साथ उसने दुआ की ना. तो तरन्नुम में जो दुआ की उसमें से एक की के
That's not cute. You just go to Urdu, by the way. I just
no, it's not going to be in Urdu. So as soon as he started making dua, one of the lines he said struck me. He goes, so on the day of judgment, when my tongue is out, I'm paraphrasing, because of thirst, O Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, quench my thirst through Hawd Kausar. And that was one of the many lines I remembered. And I thought, wow, for me, it was like, I hadn't heard that before. So, yeah.
जब ज़ुबान मुंह से बाहर निकल जाएगी,
तो yeah. जब जुबान प्यास से बाहर हो, तो ए नबी मोहतरम हौज़ कौसर से उसकी आबियारी कीजिएगा.
आबियारी कीजिएगा, आबियारी.
Subhanallah. Lekin, yeah, it was mind blowing for me that how much of a tradition there is in our culture of expressing your love with Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in various different forms, ways, and more you interact with this form of faith, more you come across it and more you feel. So the ayahs of today probably will go towards that. Murad-e kalbe khalil ho tum, inshallah. Faisal, aaj ki ayat? Surah Ibrahim, Surah Anbiya.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
وهذا ذكر مبارك أنزلناه أفأنتم له منكرون.
And this Quran is a blessed message which we have sent down. Then are you with it unacquainted?
وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إبراهيم رشده من قبل وكنا به عالمين.
And we had certainly given Abraham his sound judgment before, and we were of him well knowing.
إذ قال لأبيه وقومه ما هذه التماثيل التي أنتم لها عاكفون.
When he said to his father and his people, "What are these statues to which you are devoted?"
قالوا وجدنا آباءنا لها عابدين.
They said, "We found our fathers worshippers of them."
قال لقد كنتم أنتم وآباؤكم في ضلال مبين.
He said, "You were certainly, you and your fathers, in manifest error."
قالوا أجئتنا بالحق أم أنت من اللاعبين.
They said, "Have you come to us with truth, or are you of those who jest?"
قال بل ربكم رب السماوات والأرض الذي فطرهن وأنا على ذلكم من الشاهدين.
He said, "No, rather your Lord is the Lord of the heavens and the earth who created them, and I, to that, am of those who testify."
وتالله لأكيدن أصنامكم بعد أن تولوا مدبرين.
And I swear by Allah, I will surely plan against your idols after you have turned and gone away.
فجعلهم جذاذا إلا كبيرا لهم لعلهم إليه يرجعون.
So he made them into fragments, except a large one among them, that they might return to it and question.
قالوا من فعل هذا بآلهتنا إنه لمن الظالمين.
They said, "Who has done this to our gods? Indeed, he is of the wrongdoers."
قالوا سمعنا فتى يذكرهم يقال له إبراهيم.
They said, "We heard a young man mention them who is called Abraham."
قالوا فأتوا به على أعين الناس لعلهم يشهدون.
They said, "Then bring him before the eyes of the people that they may testify."
قالوا أأنت فعلت هذا بآلهتنا يا إبراهيم.
They said, "Have you done this to our gods, O Abraham?"
قال بل فعله كبيرهم هذا فاسألوهم إن كانوا ينطقون.
He said, "Rather this, the largest of them did it. So ask them if they should be able to speak."
فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون.
So they returned to blaming themselves and said to each other, "Indeed, you are the wrongdoers."
ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم لقد علمت ما هؤلاء ينطقون.
Then they reversed themselves, saying, "You have already known that these do not speak."
قال أفتعبدون من دون الله ما لا ينفعكم شيئا ولا يضركم.
He said, "Then do you worship instead of Allah that which does not benefit you at all or harm you?"
أف لكم ولما تعبدون من دون الله أفلا تعقلون.
Uff to you and to what you worship instead of Allah. Then will you not use reason?
قالوا حرقوه وانصروا آلهتكم إن كنتم فاعلين.
They said, burn him and support your gods if you are to act.
قلنا يا نار كوني بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم.
Allah said, O fire, be coolness and safety upon Abraham.
وأرادوا به كيدا فجعلناهم الأخسرين.
And they intended for him harm, but we made them the greatest losers.
صدق اللہ العظیم. شروع اللہ کے نام سے جو نہایت مہربان بہت رحم کرنے والا ہے. سامعین، یہ سورہ انبیاء کی طویل ترین جو حصہ ہے ہم نے آپ کے سامنے رکھا، جس میں حضرت ابراہیم علیہ السلام کا پورا قصہ ہے. سورہ انبیاء میں سے حضرت ابراہیم علیہ السلام کا، جس میں کہا گیا کہ ہم نے اپنے باپ دادا کو ان کی عبادت کرتے پایا. اس نے کہا تم بھی گمراہ ہو اور تمہارے باپ دادا بھی صریح گمراہی میں پڑے ہوئے تھے. انہوں نے کہا کیا تو ہمارے سامنے اپنی اصل خیالات پیش کر رہا ہے یا مذاق کرتا ہے؟ اس نے جواب دیا نہیں، بلکہ فی الواقع تمہارا رب وہی ہے جو زمین اور آسمان کا رب اور اس کا پیدا کرنے والا ہے. اس پر میں تمہارے سامنے گواہی دیتا ہوں، اور خدا کی قسم میں تمہاری غیر موجودگی میں ضرور تمہارے بتوں کی خبر لوں گا. چنانچہ اس نے ان کو ٹکڑے ٹکڑے کر دیا اور صرف ان کے بڑے کو چھوڑ دیا تاکہ شاید وہ اس کی طرف رجوع کریں. انہوں نے آ کر بتوں کا یہ حال دیکھا تو کہنے لگے ہمارے خداؤں کا یہ حال کس نے کر دیا؟ بڑا ہی ظالم تھا کوئی. بعض لوگ بولے ہم نے ایک نوجوان کو ان کا ذکر کرتے سنا تھا جس کا نام ابراہیم ہے. انہوں نے کہا تو پکڑ لاؤ اسے سب کے سامنے تاکہ لوگ دیکھ لیں اس کی کیسی خبر لی جاتی ہے. ابراہیم کے آنے پر انہوں نے پوچھا کیوں ابراہیم، تو نے ہمارے خداؤں کے ساتھ یہ حرکت کی؟ اس نے جواب دیا بلکہ یہ سب کچھ ان کے اس سردار نے کیا ہے، انہی سے پوچھ لو اگر یہ بولتے ہوں. یہ سن کر وہ لوگ اپنے ضمیر کی طرف پلٹے اور اپنے دلوں میں کہنے لگے واقعی تم خود ہی ظالم ہو. مگر پھر ان کی مت پلٹ گئی اور بولے تو جانتا ہے کہ یہ بولتے نہیں؟ ابراہیم نے کہا پھر کیا تم اللہ کو چھوڑ کر ان چیزوں کو پوج رہے ہو جو نہ تمہیں نفع پہنچانے پہ قادر اور نہ نقصان؟ تف ہے تم پر اور تمہارے ان معبودوں پر جن کی تم اللہ کو چھوڑ کر پوجا کرتے ہو. کیا تم کچھ بھی عقل نہیں رکھتے؟ انہوں نے کہا جلا ڈالو اس کو اور حمایت کرو اپنے خداؤں کی اگر تمہیں کچھ کرنا ہے. ہم نے کہا اے آگ ٹھنڈی ہو جا اور سلامتی بن جا ابراہیم پر. وہ چاہتے تھے کہ ابراہیم کے ساتھ برائی کریں مگر ہم نے ان کو بری طرح ناکام کر دیا. صدق اللہ العظیم. So Sheikh, this is a complete kind of story of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam with quite a bit of detail of how the thing that I want to start with today is this word rushd that we discussed yesterday in a bit of detail, but a bit more on it today. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. In this translation of Urdu that I have, it says that اور اب یہ بابرکت ذکر ہم نے تمہارے لیے نازل کیا پھر کیا تم اس کو قبول. ہاں، اس سے پہلے بھی ہم نے ابراہیم کو اس کی ہوش مندی بخشی تھی اور ہم اس کو خوب جانتے تھے. یعنی ہوش مندی، the ability to see
Decipher.
right from wrong.
Yeah, the ability to decipher right from wrong.
So this is the highlight of Ibrahim alayhi salam's abilities, due to which this young man was able to do what he did, that he could see right from wrong.
Yeah, so rushd is essentially maturity, mental maturity, psychological maturity. Rushd is anastu minhum rushda. So in the Quran it talks about, giving people and minors, their financial affairs when you see that you've tested them on their maturity, their kind of mental maturity. And so what this verse means is that because before it mentions the Prophet Musa and Harun, just before this, and it says, and before them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted rushd. And so rushd can mean a number of things. That's, I think I may have mentioned it yesterday. First and foremost, it means this idea of, if based on what I was mentioning yesterday, prophecy. So, you know, this idea of prophecy being the bridge that, you know, is in this chapter, taking us from, you know, the discussion about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and him taking people to account for their actions, to how we deal with it, and the human beings will be told about this, which is through prophets. So it talks about the prophet Moses and Aaron, and it talks about the Prophet ﷺ who has given revelation. And then it says another example of that is the rushd that was given to the Prophet Ibrahim. So some people say it's actually prophecy itself, God telling us that he will be made a prophet. In other words, what he's doing here is proving the fact that he's worthy of being a prophet. So in other words, Allah is saying he will be a prophet, and to prove that he's a good choice, look at what he did when he was young. So it's not that he's been given mental directly. It's not saying directly he's given mental maturity. It's saying he's got prophecy, and the proof of him deserving prophecy is that look how intelligent he is at that young age. Or you could say, yeah.
So this leads to this. I think we discussed this before at some point a few years ago, but this leads to this discussion amongst some scholars that the maqam nabuwa, the station of nabuwa is acquired, can be acquired. Perfect yourself to a certain degree, and you show the qualities of a person who could be a guide, is when you are awarded this status of Nabi.
No,
or is it predetermined?
No, Nabuwa and Risala is predetermined. It's irrelevant and disconnected to a person's ability to acquire it. But what is there is the person has already been given the qualities and capacities by God. And also part of it is they've developed them themselves, that they are deserving of being a prophet. So it's almost as if God will not choose a person that's unbefitting to be a prophet, if that makes sense. They have to live a life which shows through their own choice that they're worthy of being a prophet, and then God chooses them. So this is like istifa, this is choice. God chooses them. And those qualities are things like, you know, as al-fatana, zahin, as you mentioned a couple of days ago. So this idea of being zahin, it comes up in this verse, very interesting, because rushd is connected to that. You asked about rushd. Rushd is discernment and intelligence and maturity. Because if you think about how the Prophet Ibrahim engages with them at that young age, first of all, he speaks to them. He says, what are these idols that you've set up in worshipping other than God? And then what he then does is that he says, لَأَكِيدَنَّهُمْ, I'm going to destroy them, basically saying, I'm going to plot against them. I'm going to do an action. And so he moves from, first of all, trying to convince them through speech. And then he goes, when that doesn't work, he goes to action. And what's interesting is the Prophet, you know, the very famous hadith, it was the Prophet said, whoever sees something evil or bad should change it with their heart. Yeah, بقلبه. فإن لم يستطع. No, he says بيده فإن لم يستطع. So change it with their hands. فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه. Either change it with their hand, or change it with their tongue, or change it with their heart. And so there's a gradation here.
And that's the weakest form of faith.
Yeah, the weakest form of faith, meaning the least impactful form of faith. Now, what we have here in the situation of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is that if you think of his life, his first appreciation of the futility and you know, lack of utility and misguidance of idol worship is in his heart. Because he sees the sun, sees the moon, sees the stars, and in his heart he's saying, La uhibbul afilin, I don't like things that set. He's not preaching to anybody, he's just saying it. It's an observation that he's having of the sun. That's my Lord, it sets. The moon, it sets. The stars, they set. And all of a sudden, in his heart, he has his appreciation of the fact that these are not things worthy of worship. And then he goes from that to the tongue when he tells them, you know, how are you standing in worshipping idols other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In other words, he's rebuking them with his tongue. And when that doesn't work, what does he do? He goes to actually physically doing something, biyadihi. And so and the Prophet Ibrahim is showing us a gradation of how to create change. If you can do it with the lesser of something, you do it. And then you kind of progress to something more difficult, which is speech. And if you can't, then do it with your hand. And so it's almost the inverse of what the Prophet ﷺ is saying, isn't it? Think about it.
This is very, very, very important. Okay, let's pause here, right?
No,
The hadith again, right? The hadith says with the hand, with the heart, or with the hand, speech, or just
heart
and heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this hadith is being used growing up as kind of like activist. This is always used, sometimes out of context, I feel. That the hand is used as a most polished form of your faith, without knowing the repercussions. And to date, like even what happened like a few weeks ago in this part of the world where I am just now, is extrapolation of this understanding of hadith, that we will change things with our hands first. We are on the roads and we can do what we need to do to get things sorted. And then the next part is your heart, and the next part is your the speech. The speech is there are fiery speeches, but then whenever you find a place where you could be destructive, you will be, because Hazrat Ibrahim is what he did.
Yeah, so this is fascinating, because what I just explained is part of a Sharia is to gradation. Like if you deny gradation, you deny the Quran. Like if you think of the way the Quran is revealed, why is it revealed entrenching Aqidah, Tawheed, Risala, Hisab, Yawm al-Akhir, all the things of disbelief itself, faith in God, angels, unseen. Then once that's entrenched, what do? You tell people, have good akhlaq. That's the second kind of layer of it, to be good. وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, tell people good words, say good words to people. And then you start to implement positive laws, such as Prophet set up a marketplace. He encouraged people to give a charity. He did positive actions. And it's towards the end of the Prophet's life that he has sanctions meaning punishments. And to the point that some of the punishments weren't clarified completely, according to some, like riba, for example. Ibn Abbas famously said that I wish that the Prophet had explained the verses of riba clearly, so they were not a point of contention amongst the people. And so the Sharia and the Quran is all based upon a gradation. It's a fact of the revelation of the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ did everything through gradation.
Tadarruj.
Tadarruj is like no one can deny that. It's impossible for any Muslim to deny, let alone scholar, to deny the fact that Tadarruj is the way the Prophet taught. So when he sent Mu'adh, for example, everything I think of in this moment in time, when I'm thinking of this topic, is Tadarruj, because the Prophet sent Mu'adh to radiyallahu anhu to Yemen, and he said to him, tell the people that there's belief in only one God, Tawheed, and if they accept, then tell them that there's 5 prayers made obligatory upon them in the day and night. If they accept, then there's zakat taken from their rich and given back to their poor. In other words, this tadarruj. If they don't accept the belief in God, then leave them, and that's it. The prayer is way down the line, and the zakat's way down the line. And so this is exactly what's happening in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, where he is internalizing his hatred towards worshipping things. The sun, the moon, the stars, in himself. He's not speaking essentially he's not preaching to anybody. And when he then starts to tell people, he's preaching, he's telling people, don't worship these idols. Why are you worshiping these idols? What are these idols you're worshiping? In other words, getting them to at least connect with him. They're not. And he says, okay, I will plot against your idols. And at that point, he escalates the whole situation, where nothing will happen unless he escalates it to that point. The point is not.
There is this I feel sometimes there is a collective communal guilt that some of the communities carry, that you really believe in something else, but you're only acting on part of it because you believe in tadarruj, which is sometimes there is an allegation on Muslim community that it's not tadarruj. What in one of the sects or one of the understanding is taqiyya. You're hiding. You're actually believing in something else, but you're hiding the fact that this is what you want to achieve, and you only present part of your faith, not the full. नहीं ऐसा नहीं है.
It might be. I mean, so who's this accusation against?
Against me, you.
Meaning, but we want to be much more
We
change
would
with a
want
hand.
to, yeah. Something that you hate, something that your faith forces you to hate. You're expected to hate a certain act, a communal act, but you're not doing anything about it. You're just keeping quiet and waiting for the right time, right moment. And waiting for the right moment is termed as tadarruj.
Yes.
But the allegation is you're just kind of like hiding the reality of your faith, not expressing it even fully, and you're just waiting for the right moment. That's not.
That's life. That's life. What you want is not always what you can demand, and so you it's like I was reading the newspaper today about an upcoming meeting between the new president of the United States of America and President Erdogan. And so after this American president had, for the first time in history, he articulated the fact that there was a genocide against the Armenian people, which is in the context of the First World War, talking about genocide and one party against the other is just like completely farcical. So this very quote unquote very intelligent American president, supposedly better than the one that previously left, has for the first time accused the Ottomans of committing an intentional genocide against another people. And then the whole fallout of that was there was the big furore in Turkey and all the rest of it. And then the foreign spokesman said that, hopefully we have so many, because of the upcoming meeting, we have so many things in common and it'll be a fantastically fruitful meeting between Erdogan and Biden. And, everything's obviously the known facts are there, but you can't say, okay, we're going to go meet and we're going to have a big argument in the Oval Office about how dare he say this. The reality is that's how life is. But it's not taqiyya, it is the fact that you cannot have things your own way on your timetable because other people may have completely different agendas. And what you have to do is come to an agreement to move forward on things that you agree upon in a way that you will in the end get what you want. Now, that's not taqiyya because it's not as if we're hiding anything of the fact that what we know is, obnoxious morally and, in terms of natural law and all these things are obnoxious. This is a time and place to, press that and to express that. But if they ask us, we're not going to say, no, no, we like it, but then a couple of years later saying, no, we're actually lying because we actually hate it. No. Everything that's known in Islamic law to be obnoxious to revelation and to natural law is obnoxious now and in the future. And it's known now. It's not as if you're going to ask me about something today and I'll say, we actually like you. And then 2 years later, I'll say, no, actually, I was hiding it. It's open.
It's just wisdom, pragmatism.
And the problem is if people are not able to express what your faith believes, especially in this day and age, they should not speak.
Yeah.
There's the ways of saying it, which is a big problem here. When Muslims speak about certain things, I remember I've been on numerous times on Nicky Campbell's Big Question show, and what's fascinating about that is he always goes after the Muslim, member in the panel, and usually destroys them because the Muslim does not know how to say something that's sensible or reasonable. So he has to either lie and say, I don't believe in that, and the Quran doesn't say this. Or they say, yes, it does. What are you going to do about it? We want to apply it right now. and how dare you not let us express this. No, there's a way of being reasonable, and there's a way of saying it without being, threatening, and that's it. And so we don't have the ability to do that. The Prophet never capitulated. He never kind of gave in on his demands, but he said, okay, leave it for now. It's like the situation in Ta'if. The people of Bani Thaqif came, in Ta'if, the people of Bani Thaqif came to Medina, and they negotiated their Islam, how to become Muslims at the end of the Prophet's life, in year 10. And they kept negotiating and refusing to do everything. Didn't want to pray, didn't want to do wudu, wanted to commit zina, wanted to take usury, everything. The Prophet said, no, it's as it is. And then they said, we're not going to pay zakat, and we're not going to go on jihad. The Prophet said, okay. Not saying that, okay, I'll take it out of the Quran, so we don't aqimus salah, full stop. He said, okay, for this period in time, you don't have to do it. It's still there for everybody else. And the companions, they got really confused and said, oh, Messenger of God, why have you said that to them? He says, they will pay zakat and they will go on jihad. Because he didn't negotiate. He didn't give in. It's part and parcel of our faith. Muslims nowadays, they want to, negotiate and give in to all these demands that we're a live, lovely, cuddly religion. And we don't have anything to stand upon. We have no backbone. And then all of a sudden, when people realize we have no backbone, they're going to think, well, it's not just another religion like other religions, useless. The point is, you have to show this non-negotiable, this love the Prophet ﷺ. You cannot insult our Prophet. But we say it in the context of the fact that we want to see a result of that. We want to see something practical coming out of that statement that we know can be implemented in a legal framework where, you can actually have some recourse to some kind of judgment. Yeah. So
this story of Ibrahim does teach that tadarruj as well.
It teaches tadarruj. It's fascinating because it teaches tadarruj, the way I've mentioned, and then it teaches you that when the push comes to shove, you can't be wishy-washy.
Yeah.
Either you worship idols or you don't.
You got to say, look, I didn't do it. Maybe ask this.
Yeah, but that's like that's like the point being made through mockery and sarcasm. So you're not going to say, okay, they'll become worshiping God in the next generation. So we'll wait, and I'll just wait here, and then hopefully I'll teach the kids, and they'll worship God. No, this is a non-negotiable thing. You don't negotiate on that, and so he didn't negotiate. And the fascinating thing about it is that he said, I will plot against them. He plotted, he won. And then the Quran says at the end of this section that they plotted against him and they were the ones that lost. So the Prophet Ibrahim plotted, he won. He did it through his mind, that intelligence and that fatana that he had. They tried to plot against him. They kind of brought him into the public to mock him and be judge and jury against him. They lost. They tried to throw him and burn him in a raging fire. Miraculously, he didn't even do anything. And then they're the ones that, through their plotting, have been defeated. And so the whole cycle is fascinating.
Although not to the core of the faith, but practical situations in civilizations and in life. Some time ago, in one of the Muslim countries, some religious zealous people, they were in power, and one of the first things they did, they started decimating the statues of Buddha, and they were there for centuries, and the World Heritage Site. And
I mean, they're before Islam.
Yeah,
they predated Islam.
So similar situation, and the plea was, this is what Ibrahim did, and we're going to do the same. Where I am these days, I remember there is a square in Lahore called Charing Cross, and there used to be a statue of the Queen, and that was called Queen's Square, but it's no more. As a child, I remember that statue was there, and same with Punjab University, the Alfred statue who founded the university. It was a statue, many statues there. Okay. So, how do you reconcile? How do you interpret when people who have religious inclination, who are people of faith, so they thought they took this as a challenge that these statues will not be there on the roads of Lahore. Translating faith into reality when you are in power. And how do you feel about it after reading these ayahs? What is theological guidance in these kind of matters?
Yeah, the theological guidance is, first of all, a legal guidance, which is شرع من قبلنا ليس بشرع لنا. It's a basic principle, apart from the Shafi'i school, that a previous, modus operandi, or a way of acting and behaving, is not a rule for our Sharia, because we have a Sharia ourselves, a law ourselves. In other words, we can agree on what's right and what's wrong, but the way you deal with it in the past may not be the way that the Prophet asked us to deal with it today. So what was permitted in the past may not be permitted today. What was forbidden in the past may not be forbidden today, which is actually more of the case. So that's the first thing. The stories of prophets are for the morals of them. And the basic moral is the corruption of idol worship and the obligation of standing up against idol worship, as by debates and by teaching. Now, the way that you deal with something is a completely different thing. Again, from law, not from theological perspective. If there was a situation where there was people worshipping idols in that public context and they were adoring them, and they'd become Muslim, they can't have the faith of Islam and worship, which essentially was something in the Arabian Peninsula that the Prophet did, is that specifically for the Arabian Peninsula, such as is the opinion of Imam Malik and Abu Hanifa, there would be no worship of idols and polytheism on the Arabian Peninsula. That's a given. And then, leave aside the legal issues, then you've got the issue of, these Buddhist statues that were in Afghanistan. They were there predating Islam. Like the Baramika who advised Harun al-Rashid, they were previously Buddhist priests. The Muslims, had control over that place from the time of Muhammad bin Qasim and the expeditions that took place at that time, within a century of Islam. Now, after that, you had empires in the Muslim world which are actually famed for being, at least 3 or 4 centuries, famed for, in fact, more than 3 or 4, 5 centuries, were famed for having access to explosives. So, in other words, bombs and ammunition is not something new, not something we just invented now. The gunpowder empires were the Mughal, the Ottoman, and the Safavid empires, Muslim empires, all around that area. So they were there with bombs and explosives. They could have done that a long time ago. No one's worshipping them. And so the whole point is, this is like an ibrah. This is like a teaching tool for people to see that, look at these are beautiful things that people created, but at the same time so stupid, because the fact that they created them, and how can they worship them? Like, it shows us where human beings were in the past, that they had to create something to worship, and they themselves made it. They invented it.
So preserving the heritage of people's thinking at the time,
I think it's very powerful. I mean, most people today would disagree with me. I completely disagree with me, because, in the UK, for example, there's, the slave trade discussions coming up, and the kind of situation in America amongst the Black African Muslim oppression it's a strategic and it's a systematic oppression of a peoples in America. Now, that's coupled with now discussions about reparations, and so statues in most UK cities, and also Europe as well, who own slaves, or say, for example, in Glasgow, you have the tobacco trade, which Great Western Road, Great Western Road it's the Great Western Road is built by the tobacco merchants of Glasgow. All these mansions that are there, all on the back of slave trade. And so you have this discussion, which I think is worth thinking about and not acting upon yet, which is, what's better, to have the statues there and have them as pointers towards a discussion about what we were like in the past, like a real discussion about how grotesque we were as human beings, that this is the people we honor, or tear them down and forget the fact that human beings could ever do that. Now, that discussion nowadays is such a knee-jerk discussion that it is basically pull them down, burn them, without, I feel, any understanding of the psychological ramifications of that, meaning that, yes, you're saying that it's a mockery against and an affront against the people that suffered, but a lesson of history is a lesson that never disappears. And if you have that and you teach people about the history and you mark it out as being part and parcel of your curriculums and your school teaching and the way that people discuss these issues, it means that the natives there, quote unquote natives, will realize, this privilege that they have is in the back of very, very obnoxious actions that their forefathers did. And I think that's much more poetic, much stronger, and much more potent than just destroying things. And I guarantee most people disagree.
So leaving Cecil Rhodes, So a lot of people I know, they were on the scholarship in Oxford from Pakistan, from all Southeast Asia.
Yeah, Bill Clinton, he won the Cecil Rhodes scholarship.
And most of many of our friends from our school, they were Cecil Rhodes scholars. Now there is a connection. They say we were on scholarship. We are who we are because of the scholarship. And now the statue is being taken off in Oxford. That was taken off, actually, physically taken off.
It wasn't based on debate. It was based on, whatever it is. It's kind of a reactionary movement, which I fail to see how it has any kind of it will have any serious positive impact, because it's actually disingenuous to its own aims. It's actually doing things which I feel will actually be detrimental to its own aims and objectives. And that's the whole purpose. Nobody's disagreeing. Nobody here is disagreeing about the fact that these were obnoxious people, even at their time, and the fact that you cannot honor and privilege people. You have to mark them out as part of history. And what better way than to have actually go and see the place where these people are honored, and that's an irony, because how can they be honored if you look at their history? And I think the past, if you do that in terms of Islam, for example, you start going back and you start talking about conquest and taking over people's lands and all the rest of it, you might as well just go back to the streets of Mecca or streets of Medina and say we need to retreat from every city that we entered because we didn't go with official permission to come in. And the moment that you go through historical reparations, you're going into a very, very murky, tricky area of the human psyche, because what are you going to do there? Where's the end reparation? You end up going to the
Sheikh. So what also comes to mind is that, okay, there is a story of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam in this Surah Anbiya that we've listened to the recitation, but there is a bit of a contrast between how Prophet ﷺ dealt with idols and how Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam dealt with it. Is it the time and age, the time it passed, or the situation was different? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what I understand of his seerah is this is not how he did things. He did not go and destroyed things.
I think the opposite.
Yeah.
Because essentially, the Prophet Ibrahim did what he could in the time that he was there in an effective way. The Prophet did it in the same way at the most effective time that he could do it. So you're talking about this intelligence that prophets had, which is they both agree on what needs to be done. It's a question of, okay, when's the right time?
Rushd.
So it's as if they weren't disagreeing upon what their action was. The Prophet pushed down the idols. He just tipped them with his staff. So the end result was the same. But the point is, it's the end result. It's not the way you get there. The way you get there is through your thinking and analyzing when's the best time to do something. And the important thing is to get it done. إذا كنت مرسلا ذي حاجة مرسل فارسل حكيما ولا توصيه, as Ibn Abi Sulaiman, his famous point, he says, if you're going to send somebody for an action, send somebody wise. Don't tell them what to do, because they'll know what to do. And so the Prophet Ibrahim was wise. He knew what he needed to do. Don't tell him. Allah's not going to tell him, okay, do this and then say this. And if they say this, come back to me and I'll tell you the answer to it. Just yallah, go. And then the Prophet as well, he's fatin. The Prophet sent, and Allah's not going to tell him, okay, text me if, astaghfirullah. Like, what do you think this is? Prophets are Nabwa, Al-Anbiya. Surah Al-Anbiya is about people at the peaks of these mountains that we look up to and we honor because of their amazing ability to think and have maturity.
One of the names of Prophet ﷺ is Muhyi, the reviver.
Muhyi al-Mawta. So the Prophet is the one that revives people's hearts, because the one that revives people's souls and bodies is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Muhyi, and we know this in our religion as well, Muhyi din, the reviver of religion. Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi, for example, the great Andalusian, born, buried in now Damascus in the northern part of the city. He revived, give life to religion. In other words, the perspective of religion was waning and people were misunderstanding things. He came and gave this breath of fresh air to the religion. Muhyi is one of the names of the Prophet because he gave life to dead hearts. Like Fadala, he touched his heart, prayed for him. Just when he was about to stab the Prophet. And Prophet, what are you doing? He says, I'm remembering God. He wasn't. He was trying to assassinate the Prophet. The Prophet placed his hand in his heart. And Fadala says that as soon as he took his hand off my heart, nobody more hated to me, and after that, nobody more beloved to me. The heart was just given this amazing burst of life by the Prophet's touch. So Muhyi.
Muhyi. And Muhyi, the name of Prophet ﷺ, relevance for us, people who are listening in the final moments. Oh, time flew today. It's only 3 minutes to iftar.
Are you sure you're not timing it? It's not 10 o'clock. It's not 9 o'clock, is it?
It is.
What time's iftar? 9
o'clock. It's 3 to 9.
So I was speeding up because I thought iftar was earlier. But so what does Muhyi mean to us? It's one of these names that are. It's a name through which you honor and you recognize and you adore something that you hope to emulate. You're a person that gives life, not death. People, somebody comes to you with a good idea. You don't say stupid idea. You say, good idea. Why don't we do it this way? You don't kill people's aspirations. You don't kill people's enthusiasm for religion. Somebody comes to you and says, I want to do this. And you say, Ya akhi, haram. Why can't you say, the Prophet used to tell us to this and this? Same thing. You've just diverted them from something that's okay. Let's accept it's wrong. But say the Prophet used to, that's a good idea. We can do it this way, and it's a sunnah of the Prophet to do it this way. So somebody asked you, did the Prophet, didn't wipe his hands on his face after dua? You don't have to say, yes or no. You can say, okay, that this is how the Prophet did something, or let's make dua together. Muhyi, just revive a sunnah of the Prophet. And the Prophet said that whoever revives a sunnah is as if they revived me. So inshallah, everybody can revive one sunnah. Find out about one sunnah the Prophet used to do that's hidden and missed and forgotten about. Do it, inshallah, and you'll be as if you've revived the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam.
Subhanallah, Mawlaikul Khatmur Rasul Nabi Sallam. And it is 2 minutes to 9, end of reflections for today. Inshallah, tomorrow back at 8 o'clock. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu
के बात अब तक बनी हुई है तजल्लियों के कफील हो तुम तजल्लियों के कफील हो तुम मुराद कल्बे खलील हो
तुम हो
मुराद कल्बे खलील हो तुम खुदा की रोशन दलील हो तुम खुदा की रोशन दलील हो तुम ये सब तुम्हारी ही रोशनी है खुदा की रोशन दलील हो तुम ये सब तुम्हारी ही रोशनी है ये सब
तुम्हारा करम है आका। ठीक है जी।